Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for Assemblymember Seawright's virtual Town Hall Tuesday. We will begin in just a few moments. If you're watching live on Facebook, please feel free to write your questions for the speaker in the chat. Questions can also be submitted in the chat on Zoom, and questions can be sent to our office by email at seawright@nyassembly.gov. Our office has received questions for tonight the past few days as well, and we will work to get all the questions answered. For any questions that we do not answer live tonight, our office will work to get you an answer as soon as possible. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will begin in just a few moments.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Town Hall Tuesday, a special community affairs program live streaming on Facebook. This is our 42nd edition of Town Hall Tuesday. We thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, privileged and honored to serve the Upper East Side, Yorkville, and Roosevelt Island. Tonight, we have a very special program with two experts in their respective fields to talk to you about the election and ranked choice voting. Ballot access is central to our democracy, and we must hold the Board of Elections accountable in doing their part to educate voters, simplify the process of voting, including requests for absentee ballots, and the accurate account and validation of those ballots submitted by mail. Voting is one of the most fundamental rights that we have as citizens, and it's essential to our democracy, and therefore we must protect it at all costs. During early voting this last year, we saw long lines that wrapped around Wagner Middle School 3 times. People waited for up to 6 hours, some days in the pouring rain, just to be able to vote. It was totally unacceptable. We held a press conference. We threatened litigation against the Board of Elections. We demanded that the commissioners do the right thing. We secured Marymount Manhattan College as an early voting site, and they are also lined up to be an early voting site again this June. We thank President Carrie Walk for offering her campus. You may have seen the situation last fall. There were 118,000 people, the largest in New York State, that were sent to Wagner Middle School to cast their early vote. It was covered by the Washington Post. It was nothing more than voter suppression. And we were very pleased to get the early voting site open for the last weekend of early voting. In the state legislature, we passed early voting in New York State so that all New Yorkers could have access to the polls up to 10 days prior to the election. We witnessed the huge turnout over the first weekend of early voting, with over 40,000 people voting across Manhattan's 16 early voting poll sites. This session, we are working to make elections safer. Assembly Bill 3356 was conferenced in Albany passed by the Assembly and signed into law to reduce the number of designating petition signatures that are required. Petitioning starts for our local races coming up on March 2nd, and we have reduced the number required by 70%. I was proud to co-sponsor that legislation. I'm also looking at additional legislation to do away with petitioning in New York State, so I welcome your input, your advice, and write to us about how you would like to see our electoral process work. We've been working hard on reforming the election process. The governor signed my Assembly Bill 9001 to save taxpayers' resources and to promote efficiency and transparency by allowing candidates to duly satisfy local and state requirements in order to run for office. I'm a proponent of pre-registration of 16-year-old voters and the registration and tracking of absentee ballots to ensure that every vote counts when voting by absentee. Additionally, I'm proud to co-sponsor and support automatic voter registration and absentee ballot reforms to assure that voters, they will be able to obtain an absentee ballot during a pandemic, process the ballots earlier, and cure a ballot submitted without a signature or otherwise. This is only the beginning of our reforms that are needed. I am committed to advancing additional measures to further modernize and strengthen our voting system. There's a new way to vote in New York City called ranked choice voting, which was approved by 73% of the voters in 2019 on a ballot measure. Instead of choosing only one favorite candidate, voters will rank each candidate in a race by preference, choosing their top 5 candidates on the ballot. Tonight, we will hear from the experts and advocates for ranked choice voting in New York City. Laura Wood, Senior Advisor and General Counsel, Democracy NYC. Sean Dugar, Education Campaign Program Director from RANK, The Vote NYC. So we're pleased to have both of them join us this evening. I will start with Laura Wood. She's a Senior Advisor and General Counsel to the Mayor's Democracy NYC initiative, advising on election law and voting reforms. Its mission is to increase voter registration and participation in New York City. Prior to this, she spent 5 years as Senior Advisor and Special Counsel to the New York State Attorney General. Prior to that, she was Chief Counsel to the Democratic Conference for the New York State Senate and Policy Director to State Senator Daniel Squadron. She clerked for the Honorable Rebecca Pallmeyer of the U.S. District Court of the Northern District and was an associate at Patterson, Belknap, Webb and Tyler. After law school, she took improv classes at Second City, and a career on Saturday Night Live did not pan out, so her Juris Doctorate degree came in handy. So that's a little fun fact about Laura. Laura, we welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. I think you're on mute.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. That was quite an unexpected introduction. I'm glad I'm not supposed to make you laugh tonight because, you know, as you know, that career didn't pan out. But I am so privileged to be here with you and serve in this role as General Counsel and Senior Advisor on Democracy NYC. And I just want to take a moment to thank Assembly Member Seawright for her leadership on all of those issues that she just went over. The actions of the state legislature in the last few years in the elections area have been nothing short of historic. And we have them to thank for so many of the reforms that we are now enjoying, in particular early voting. And in particular, your advocacy in your district for the additional site was really remarkable. And I'm so glad that it was able to come to fruition and that Marymount will continue to serve as an early voting site going forward. I know that we are here tonight, however, to talk about the upcoming elections. And actually, you chose a perfect evening to have this particular conversation because in just under 2 hours, The polls close out in Queens, where there is currently a special election going on for a council district to replace Donovan Richards, who's now the Queensborough president. And actually 4 months from yesterday is the date of the municipal primary. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we don't have a lot of time to do it, but I have no doubt that with partners like Assemblymember Seawright and Sean from Rank the Vote, who I'm thrilled is here tonight, and all of you, we can spread the word and make sure that New Yorkers are ready for this new form of voting and will participate. So I have prepared a very short presentation, and I think that someone is able to put that up on the screen, and we can sort of walk through some of the highlights of ranked choice voting.
Terrific.
Great. So as you heard, Democracy NYC is a nonpartisan city initiative focused on increasing voter participation and civic engagement. And of course, a huge part of that mission is to encourage every New Yorker to make their voice heard at the ballot box. As you might know, New York State still lags behind many others when it comes to voter turnout. While we have definitely dealt with a lot of the barriers in recent years, there are others that we do have to continue to work on. And I move forward. Our goal is to register new voters and encourage all New Yorkers to make their voices heard and to help shape their communities. Now, briefly, as I'm guessing most of you know, there is a lot on the ballot this year. I know we just had an absolutely historic, critically important election. One of our missions in the next 4 months and leading up to the general election is to make sure New Yorkers know that for our city, there is a critically important election. Like I said, the primary is less than 4 months from now, for mayor, for public advocate, for city comptroller, for the borough presidents, and for almost the entire city council. There's also a Manhattan district attorney race, which some of you may be aware of. So there's a lot at stake this year, and that's why I'm so glad that you're all participating and will help spread the word to your friends and neighbors. Now, ranked choice voting. As the Assembly member said, it's a new way to vote that was approved by just about 74% of voters in a 2019 ballot referendum. It only applies for New York City local elections starting this year. So we've already had one special election. We have another one happening today. There are 2 in March, and then the primary in June. What it means is that instead of choosing just one candidate, voters can rank up to 5. So it's that's the big change. And again, it's only going to be used in special elections and primary elections for New York City offices only. Examples of primaries that will feature ranked choice voting: mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, city council. And then you can see on the right of the screen a list of those that will not feature ranked choice voting. The only one I would call out in particular is the district attorney. There, as I said, there is a district attorney race this year. Because that is technically a state position created under state law, that does not feature ranked choice voting. So why rank the vote? And we can certainly get into more of this in the Q&A, and I'm guessing Sean will have things to say about this as well. For one thing, it eliminates runoff elections. Some of you might remember the very costly runoff we had in 2013 for public advocate. this new system will eliminate the need for those types of elections. It also means that candidates must actually get a majority to win. So if you're running for city council and there's 5 candidates in the race, you actually have to get over that 50% threshold in order to win. And we'll get into more detail about that shortly. And at least in theory, we'll see how this actually plays out. But I think other jurisdictions have shown that candidates win with broad coalitions of voters. So candidates will, especially for citywide races, will need voters who had a different first choice in order to win, at least in theory. So this is how it works. This is what the ballot will look like, except there will be names instead of candidate A through E. But essentially, there's the list of candidates on the left, as you can see, and then there's the 5 columns where you can indicate your choices. And you only pick one candidate for each choice. So you see, first is candidate B, second is candidate C, and so on. And you can rank up to 5. But one thing to note is that you can, if you so choose, rank fewer than 5. You could just vote for 1. You could rank 2, 3, 4, or 5. That's the maximum. Now, what happens after everyone has filled out their ballot and the Board of Elections has collected them all and canvassed them all, is that if a candidate right off the bat gets a majority of first place votes, then they are the winner. And that is actually what we saw happen with the first special election this year to feature ranked choice voting. One of the city council candidates out in Queens CD 24 won nearly 60% of the vote after the first round. And so there was no need to actually do the ranked choice voting process. But if no candidate gets a majority of the vote, then what happens, and I have a feeling Sean will do a much better job of explaining this, the last place candidate is eliminated. And if you were one of the people who chose that last place eliminated candidate, the candidate that you ranked second gets your vote. So if you voted for candidate B and candidate B was elected and your second choice candidate was candidate A, your vote then goes to candidate A. And this process is repeated until there are 2 candidates left, at which point the candidate with the most votes wins the election. Now, one thing that this means, and I think everyone has grown accustomed to this by now, is that we may not know the winner on election night. I mean, we already know that there's a need to count absentee ballots or military ballots that come in, but in particular, because of ranked choice voting and this process that the Board of Elections needs to go through, it is almost certain that unless there's a very clear winner on election night, i.e. someone who has pretty much blown away a majority of the votes, then it might be a week or more until all of the absentee ballots are actually opened and all the votes are counted until we know the winner of the election. Finally, I wanted to share some resources that Democracy NYC has put together, and there's a lot of other resources out there as well, which we can certainly circulate. We have a few events coming up, and all of the information can be found on this slide. There's a Black History Month event tomorrow that we are doing in collaboration with Medgar Evers. If there are any folks that you know who would like to attend a workshop in Bangla, that's happening next week. And there's also going to be a voter outreach workshop in Spanish next week. One of Democracy NYC's priorities is trying to make sure that there are events and outreach materials in multiple languages. So wanted to share those resources, and I believe the next slide has some additional workshop information as well, including the Rank the Vote website, which has a lot of great resources, a really great FAQ that our partners at the Campaign Finance Board put together, and the city BOE has put together a ranked choice voting information page. So there's a lot out there, and we are going to do our best in the next 4 months to make sure that every New Yorker has it. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to present this evening.
Well, thank you for your very informative words here. And we do have some questions that have come in from constituents. And I see our fabulous district leader who worked the poll site and was exhausted at the end, Jill Eisner, very, very dedicated to working at the polls and experiences and really sees so much about what needs to be reformed with our election process. Is ranked choice voting the same as instant runoff voting? It's one of our questions that's come in.
The short answer is yes. They're basically used interchangeably, and essentially what it means, as I said, is that instead of having an actual runoff election like we used to have, it will be the so-called runoff happens instantaneously because of the way that people actually rank their ballot. You know, I think that the reason that ranked choice voting is sort of the term of art that we've adopted in New York is because it centers the voter more on the experience, and it's more about empowering voters to make their choices and to make their voice heard. But it basically is the same thing.
How will the city overcome language and education barriers to the new voting system?
Well, that's a critically important question. And as I mentioned, we are doing some outreach events in other languages. I know that both the City Board of Elections and the Campaign Finance Board, for the information on their website, they translate them into at least 4 additional languages. We at Democracy NYC, in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and the Civic Engagement Commission, are actually undertaking an effort to expand the number of languages that materials are translated into. It won't be everything that's on those websites, but I think we'll be able to take some of the key information, in particular from the Campaign Finance Board's website, and translate that into as many as 15 languages. In addition, there is an interactive tool, which I could be mistaken, but I think Sean is actually going to demonstrate in a little bit. And it's a very, very cool thing that I think really helps voters understand how this works. We are actually working with the software engineer who created that tool to translate it into 15 languages. And that's something that anyone with the internet, anyone with a smartphone will be able to access soon. So we plan to work very hard in the coming weeks and months to get the word out about that. We've been working very closely with a number of community-based organizations as well. But it's a really, I mean, this is a situation where I think more is more. So as much as anyone can do to help get the word out, particularly to limited English proficient communities, we need to do.
So thank you. A good question that's come in: prior to ranked choice voting, people were able to make their decision based on whether or not a candidate was represented by a major party. How would someone who is not well informed on the political process be able to make a rational ranked choice vote that is in their self-interest?
That's a great question. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, one thing about ranked choice voting is that it does require us to do a bit more homework, if you will, if we really are going to select our top 5 candidates in order of preference. As many of you know, there are, I think last I heard, about 40 people running for mayor. It's going to take a lot of work on voters' part to actually learn about the candidates and decide who they want to vote for and in what order. And of course, probably not all 40 will actually be on the ballot, but there will probably be a pretty big number. Now, I will say that for a primary election, of course, those are all going to be registered Democrats. So for primaries, I think, pretty much everyone will be voting either in the Democratic or the Republican primary. And so it'll be very clear what party those candidates are with. For special elections, of course, those are open. And so there's not necessarily a clear party affiliation. But the CFB for all of those city special elections does put bios of all the candidates on their website in a voter guide. And then, there has been, I think, a lot of effort on the part of the press to cover these elections. So there is material out there, but it does require some work, both on the part of voters and hopefully on the part of candidates as well, to make sure voters get to know them.
And is it possible to write in a candidate with ranked choice voting? If so, how does one do so correctly?
Yes, my understanding, and I will admit that I haven't actually seen the ballots that the BOE is using yet, but my understanding is that there is a place to write in candidates. I've heard some discussion about whether you can actually write in 5 candidates, and the answer obviously should be yes, but I see Sean shaking his head, so he clearly knows that that's not the case. So you can only write in 1 candidate? Is that? He's holding up a 1. Okay, so that's something I know that's been raised as an issue that we may need to bring up with either the city board of elections or possibly the council. But yeah, there is an opportunity to write in, but apparently only 1.
And what if a person colors in, like all 5 bubbles for their first choice candidate? Does that disqualify the ballot, or is it a loss to vote for them?
If someone were to were to do that and basically put 1 through 5 just for 1 candidate, it would still count, but it would only count as 1 vote for that candidate. So it's the equivalent of only listing your first choice.
And is it necessary to rank your candidate past the second choice?
No, that is really up to the individual voter's discretion. If a voter, after doing their research decides, there's only 2 candidates I like, I'm only ranking 2, that is completely up to the voter.
Okay. And what would you say is the #1 reason for ranked choice voting in terms of being beneficial to our democracy?
Whew, that's tough. The #1 reason. I mean, I do think that when you look at the past experience in New York City with some of these runoff elections that have resulted in extremely low voter turnout. I can't remember the exact number from 2013, but I seem to recall that according to one statistic, each individual vote cost taxpayers $50,000. That's a tremendous amount of resources that, it seems like ranked choice voting will eliminate the need for. We asked New Yorkers to do a lot of things. People are busy. I think, ultimately there is a learning curve, but I think ranked choice voting is empowering in that it gives voters, it will hopefully give voters a little bit more of a say in terms of who our next leaders are in New York City, and hopefully save the city some money at a really critical time as well. But you know, we definitely have a lot of work to do to ensure that people actually understand it and get out there and take advantage and vote this year.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Laura. And we appreciate your sharing your expertise. We look forward to using our office as a resource to educate the community even further with handouts. We're a storefront office right next door to the post office on East 79th and York Avenue. So our next speaker is Sean Dugar. He's a political and nonprofit consultant with nearly 2 decades of experience. He's worked on a number of nonprofit, good government, and social justice organizations, organizing around issues such as police accountability, expanded access to the ballot box, and voting systems like ranked choice voting. To date, he's worked on and managed over a dozen campaigns for candidates and issue campaigns, including coordinating Democratic Party and African American outreach for California State Treasurer John Chang, organizing faith conversations in support of marriage equality, rallying Bay Area communities in opposition to the death penalty and in favor of criminal justice reform. And speaking of marriage equality, I see that we have on tonight Judith Kaysen-Windsor as well. He has also campaigned and registered over 10,000 new voters in Alameda County in 2004. And we so appreciate your joining us this evening and sharing your expertise with us, Sean. So please take it away.
Thank you so much for inviting us to participate and to share what I like to call the good news of ranked choice voting. So I'm excited to be here with you all this evening. I'm going to jump into it and start our slideshow. I think you all have that queued up. So while that's coming up on screen, one of, you know, they say you have to talk to voters, or you have to talk to people 7 times in order for them to understand and to soak in what you're saying. So some of this may be repetition, but it's repetition on purpose so that you all are able to soak in all of the information on ranked choice voting. So let's go to the next slide. So we're going to do a quick recap on the upcoming changes to local elections. So as was mentioned earlier, in 2009, there was a costly low turnout runoff for public advocate and comptroller that started the debate about the use of runoff elections. Then Council Member Gail Brewer introduced the first ranked choice voting legislation in 2010. And then in 2010 and 2018, charter revision commissions met to explore how to best ensure that the votes of all voters counted. And so in 2018, the Charter Revision Commission met and heard from hundreds and hundreds of residents and community organizations. And one issue that continued to come to the forefront was ranked choice voting. So that commission voted 14-1 to place question 1 on the November 2019 ballot, and voters overwhelmingly with over 73% of the vote chose to implement ranked choice voting in New York. Next slide. So why ranked choice voting and why now? We know that the city has recently implemented term limits, which has led to 32 open council seats. Those 32 open council seats and the robust, and I like to say awesome, campaign finance system that the city has led to over 450 candidates filing to run for local office. Under the previous voting system, those candidates would have to worry about splitting the vote, and someone who doesn't necessarily represent the full diversity of a community being elected. We know under the former system, a city council member could be elected with as little as 20% of the vote. That means that 80% of voters voted for someone else, and didn't have a say in the final process. Next slide. So what's changing? I know we went over this a little bit earlier. Starting now, all local primaries and special elections for city council, borough president, public advocate, comptroller, and mayor will be ranked choice voting elections. Under RCV, runoffs are eliminated and candidates need to win with at least 50% plus one of the vote. And you now have the option to rank up to 5 candidates, including 1 write-in if you so choose. Next slide. So how to think about your rankings. So your first choice is the candidate you love. It's the candidate that you may volunteer for. It's the candidate you may donate to, but for sure it's the candidate that you're going to talk to your, excuse me, your neighbors, your friends, your family about. You know, it's the candidate who is there with you on the majority of the issues. It's the candidate that you've seen around your community for years and years. It really is the candidate that you love. Your second choice is the candidate that you like. They may not be there with you on all the issues. They may not be from your community, but they are still someone who is there with you on the majority of issues and you know will do a good job in office. Similarly, your third and fourth choices are candidates who may be there with you on some of the issues, but not all of them, but you trust to do the right thing in office. And then your fifth choice is the candidate that you may traditionally have had to hold your nose to vote for. You know, they're not necessarily the best on all the issues, but they're not the worst on all the issues. And you, by far, they're better than the other candidates in the race. Next slide. This is a video from our friends in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that we will run.
I like the owl.
You may have to go back and try it one more time. And I think you're on mute, so we can't hear it.
Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Olivia Owl. Changes are coming to the way we vote. With the new ranked choice voting, the next time you vote, instead of choosing just one candidate, you can rank them all from your first choice to your last. Here's how it works. Let's say these 5 candidates all run for mayor of Animal Town. This voter ranks Lucinda as her top choice for mayor. She also ranks her second choice, Diego, third choice, Betty, fourth choice, Roberto, and fifth choice, Felix. If Lucinda wins more than 50% of all the first ranked votes, then she's the new mayor. However, if no candidate gets more than 50%, then the least popular candidate is eliminated. Sorry, Felix. The remaining second-ranked votes from Felix's voters are redistributed. So if a number of Felix's voters rank Betty and Diego, then those 2 candidates receive additional votes. The new totals are counted and the process repeats until one candidate earns more than 50% of the total votes. Congrats, Diego, you're the new mayor. Back in the real world, before it's time to vote,
Awesome. You can
visit
stop it.
votedifferentsantafe.com for more.
So we're going to jump in and see a real world example of ranked choice voting. We've been running a mock election on social media this month for Black History Month of which historic Black leader would you like to see on the $100 bill. I'm going to share my screen. All right, and so you'll see here that we've had 119 people vote. And so we know that under ranked choice voting, you need 50% plus 1 in order to win. And so that threshold, that makes the threshold to win, that win number, 60 votes. So we see here that no candidate has received 60 votes amongst their first choices. So we have Shirley Chisholm in the lead with 29 votes, Frederick Douglass with 18, Martin Luther King with 17, John Lewis with 16, Ida B. Wells and Malcolm X tied with 10, Rosa Parks with 9, Maya Angelou with 6, and Bayard Rustin with 4. So let's, again, no candidate has reached that 60 vote threshold of first choice votes. So the candidate with the least number of votes is eliminated. They've lost the race. So in this case, Bayard Rustin, he has 4 first choice votes. His first choice, the voters who voted for him as their first choice will now have their second choice kick in, and their votes go to whoever they picked as their second choice candidate. And so here we see Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Frederick Douglass all picked up second place votes from Bayard Rustin. Now we continue this process because no one has hit that 60 vote threshold. So next to be eliminated is Maya Angelou, because she is the candidate with the lowest number of votes. So her 6 voters will now have their second choice kick in, and their vote will go to whoever they picked as their second choice. And so we see actually those votes were fairly well distributed, but several of them did go to Shirley Chisholm, pushing her closer to the edge. And so we continue this process of eliminating the lowest vote getter and redistributing their votes until someone reaches the 50% plus 1 threshold. And here we see not only did Shirley Chisholm come out with above the 50% or reach 50% plus 1 to win, she now has an overwhelming majority. She has 69 votes that give her the mandate to lead. Something else to notice, at the bottom here, you'll see exhausted votes. There's only 4 exhausted votes. That means there were only 4 out of 119 voters that did not include Shirley Chisholm or Martin Luther King on their ballot. That means there's only 4 voters out of 119 who didn't have a say in the final process. Remember, we talked about city council members being elected with 20% of the vote and 80% of voters not having a say in the final process? What we see nationally is, on average, it's less than 10% of voters who have exhausted ballots and don't have a say in the final process. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think we're going to go back into the slideshow. All right, next slide. So this is an example of what your ballot is likely to look like. And so here you see the rankings in the columns and the candidates in rows. And you'll see at the bottom is where you would add in a write-in candidate. So you have the line to add their name and then to include them wherever you want in your 5 rankings. Next slide. So talked briefly about this already. The counting rounds only kick in if no candidate receives 50% plus 1 of first choice votes. The official winner will not be declared until all votes are counted. So we know that on election night, what we'll see is the first choice votes for those who voted early and on election day. So people who went to a polling place to vote. We know that the city, the Board of Elections, is not able to start counting absentee ballots for 7 days until 7 days after election day, and military overseas ballots until 13 days after election day. So we know at the very minimum, it's 2 weeks before we have results. Ranked choice voting does not change that time frame. However, if no candidate receives 50% plus one of first choice votes after all of those ballots are counted, then the ranking process kicks in. Now, the ranking process for the general, or the tabulation process for the general, is simply hitting a button on a keyboard. And so it takes about 30 seconds for the program to run the tabulations. So ranked choice voting does not increase the amount of time or the time it takes to report out election results. Next slide. So again, why should voters use their ranking? It gives you more choice. You know, we saw in that example that the more people that you rank, the longer you continue to have a say and your voice heard in the election process. And it gives you more power. Laura mentioned this, but ranked choice voting forces all candidates to reach out to all voters, not just the small subset or block of voters that they've been elected with in the past. And even if your favorite candidate doesn't win, you still have a say in who's elected. You can vote your conscience without worrying about wasting your vote. And then lastly, ranking a second, third, fourth, or fifth choice will never hurt your favorite candidate, because those choices only kick in if your favorite candidate has already lost the race and been eliminated. Next slide. So let's go quickly through some frequently asked questions. Next slide. How many candidates do I rank? Again, you can rank up to 5 candidates, including a write-in, or as few as you like. Next slide. Do I have to use all 5 rankings? No, it's completely up to you. If there are only 2 candidates that speak to your issues and your values, you can rank just those 2 candidates. Next slide. Can I rank a candidate more than once? This is important. You cannot. If you do, and you're voting in person, the machine will spit out your ballot. So you have the opportunity there, if you're voting on site either early on election day, to request up to 2 additional ballots to make sure that your final vote counts. Now, if you're voting by mail, it's a little bit more tricky. You have to catch the error yourself before you mail in the ballot. If you catch the error, you can reach out to the Board of Elections, request a replacement ballot, and just make sure it's in enough time for them to send it to you and for you to be able to mail it back so that it's postmarked by election day. Next slide. A reminder, it does not hurt your favorite candidate to have a second, third, fourth, or fifth choice, because that only kicks in if your first choice has already been eliminated. Next slide. So just a refresher. I think this may be time number 7 of you all hearing it, so it should be soaked in. That starting this year, you will have the option to rank your top 5 candidates in the local primary and special elections for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council. You can vote for 1 candidate. You can vote for 5 candidates. It's completely up to you. Why should you rank your ballot? You don't have to worry anymore about wasting your vote, accidentally helping elect someone you don't support, splitting the vote, or a candidate splitting the vote, or someone being elected with less than a majority. With that, thank you.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. And we do have some questions that have come in. Community Board 8 member and also chair of CB8's election committee is Sherry Wiener's question: how are votes counted, by machine or manually?
So votes are counted by a machine. It's an open source software. So that means it's actually available to anyone for free on their website. And so, you know, that increases the transparency of the counting process because anyone can run the tabulation if they wanted to. So it is done by computer. Again, there is a verifiable paper trail. When folks or any of you who have been election observers, you know you get the receipt out of the machine. You still get the same receipt. The only thing is it only shows the first choice vote. And so the rest is stored in the machine and transferred over as the process has always been.
Okay, great, thank you. And is there an advantage to ranking the long shot candidate as number one?
I mean, it gives you the opportunity to vote for that person and have that vote count. I once had my pastor run for city council, and we all knew we had to vote for him, but he had no chance of winning. And he actually ended up being the first candidate eliminated. But I was able to say, I voted for you, and still have a say in the process and have the final result that I wanted of the council member being elected that I supported.
Mhm. If a person chooses not to rank all the candidates, they've asked, will their ballot be invalidated? And I think we've answered that, but you want to go ahead and reinforce it.
No, your ballot will not be invalidated. You can vote for one candidate, 3 candidates, 5 candidates, however many you like, up to 5.
We passed a law last year at the state level requiring the Board of Elections to notify voters if there is a mistake, if they forget to sign the outer envelope, as an example. With ranked choice voting, if an absentee ballot ahead of the election day is cast, will they be notified of a mistake by the Board of Elections?
So on the envelope, yes. However, New York has a secret ballot. So the moment that your ballot is taken out of that envelope, they have no way of identifying who you are. So if there's a mistake on that ballot, there's no way for them to notify you.
Do you anticipate more challenges in the counting of votes due to an error in filling out the ballot?
We don't. So we've actually been doing exit polling of the specials, and what we found is voters are very aware of how to fill out their ballot. You know, in CD24, we even had members of the media searching for someone who would tell them that it was a difficult process and they just couldn't figure it out. And guess what? They couldn't find anyone. So we find that voters definitely understand the ranking process. And that's been true across the country. In every place that's implemented RCV, you've had that exhaustion rate of about 10%. So we're not as concerned as some folks may be, based on our experience and the data so far.
And have you seen that it has changed the way organizations are endorsing candidates, for example, informing voters of the first and second choice?
I mean, we saw it today. We saw an entity endorse multiple candidates in races across the city. You know, we've been working with Planned Parenthood, and we know Planned Parenthood will be doing ranked endorsements or multiple candidate endorsements. We've been training labor. We've been, for the last year, a little bit over a year, training campaigns and candidates on how to run under ranked choice voting. So far, we've trained about 150 campaigns, and probably an equal number of organizations and leaders on how to do ranked choice endorsements.
And Sean and Laura, can you just state your contact information if constituents want to call you or email you with questions, or suggest that maybe they get like access to your presentation, your slideshow for their community-based organizations?
So I'll jump in because I'm unmuted right now. So this presentation that I just did is on our website, available in 8 different languages. We're actually updating our website at the end of the month with our new explainer video. And all of our materials are actually translated now into 13 languages. So folks can access it there at the website that is right next to my name, or right next to my head, rankthevotenyc.org. And my email address, our email address, because my colleague is here, is education@rankthevotenyc.org. But you can request this training or any training via our website.
Okay, and if we could unmute Laura and she could just reinforce her contact information. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you. Excuse me. My email address is lwood@cityhall.nyc.gov. And I'd be happy to share any materials that I have access to, the ones that we've created, as well as some other resources that we've pulled together. Our website is actually under construction right now, so I'm not going to share that just yet. But I will share that in addition to Sean's excellent website, the CFB has compiled a lot of ranked choice voting information as well. It can all be found at voting.nyc, as well as other information about the upcoming elections. So I highly encourage you to look there and spread the word. And thank you.
Terrific,
So much.
I know. Thank you. And thank you both, Laura and Sean, for sharing your expertise with us this evening. And as we draw closer to the election, I know that a lot of the senior citizens are very and have a lot of anxiety about this new voting system. And I know public high schools require students to have community service. So what I'd like to recommend is that we pair up some of our high school students with our senior population and give them a lesson. I think you have a wonderful slide show there from Santa Fe, and both of your presentations were very good. And the questions that came in, I want to thank our constituents. So wrapping up tonight, it's budget season, and I've been newly appointed to the Assembly Ways and Means Committee, playing a pivotal role in the annual New York State budget process. The committee examines all department budgets, appropriation requests, appropriation bills, and holds public fiscal hearings conducted jointly with the State Senate Finance Committee. Tomorrow is our last budget hearing, and we'll be hearing from our state health commissioner. So you can rest assured we'll have some questions for him on the vaccine rollout in the nursing home. New York State faces fiscal challenges not seen in more than a generation. That's why I'm supporting measures this session, such as the Invest in Our New York Act, to address our inequitable economy and resulting inequity in services for New Yorkers. The task ahead will not be easy as we work to defeat COVID-19 and its fallout. Just last week at the hearing on local governments, I asked Mayor de Blasio, where are our local vaccine sites? And what is your plan to service seniors and homebound people who cannot travel to a vaccination destination? He agreed to have the Department of Health work with our office to identify locations on the Upper East Side and on Roosevelt Island. We have a commitment from Asphalt Green to utilize their facility. They're one of the largest nonprofits here in Yorkville on the Upper East Side. New York City Department of Education will be reopening our middle schools for in-person learning on Thursday, February 25th. If you have a student in grades 6 through 8 and selected blended learning, your child's principal will reach out with their new schedule. And we ask that you please join us for one of our events that I'm pleased to sponsor coming up. Join us on Thursdays for our weekly no-cost PPE giveaway from 12 to 2 p.m. at our York Avenue office between 78th and 79th Street. We've started our weekly knitting social back up. Join us on Thursdays on Zoom from 2 to 4 p.m. I don't knit, but this is a very popular activity that a lot of the seniors have requested that we reinstate. So that'll be on Zoom. You can chat with your neighbors, and I know Jill Eisner is an expert knitter. We have no-cost housing legal clinic with our free pro bono legal housing attorney on Tuesdays. Sign up with our office because it does book out. The next clinic is on Tuesday, March 2nd at 4 p.m. by telephone. In March, we're having a freeze your rent clinic on Wednesday, March 3rd from 2 to 3 p.m. and a homeowners benefit clinic with the New York City Department of Finance on Wednesday, March 10th from 2 to 3 p.m. We do ask that you call our office 212-288-4607 to save your place and sign up. We ask that you stay connected with our office by signing up for our email blasts. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Seawright for New York. Or again, reach out to us at 212-288-4607. Stay safe, wash your hands frequently, keep your social distance, and wear your face covering. We are part of the Manhattan Gail Brewer's task force on the vaccine rollout. This was formed in response to the lack of vaccines. We did hear today from a physician at Weill Cornell that there are some appointments that are opening up. So we do recommend that you go online, or if you're having trouble, please call our office and we will work with you to try to get you an appointment. Again, thank you to our speakers this evening and to all of our constituents for joining in. Thank you, stay safe, and have a good night.